Don't just live for tomorrow, or just live in yesterday. Just be glad for all you have that's in today. And though you've come through many obstacles.
Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my blind reaction to Joseph, King of Dreams. This is a donation reward for Venom0027 and our only movie this week. Due to going to TriCon this weekend, I'm not going to have time to get to another movie. But I wanted to get to this. And so, yeah, Joseph, King of Dreams is a DreamWorks film, a biblical DreamWorks film. So you think of like Prince of Egypt. I assume it's made by the same people, but I don't know for sure. I don't know much of the details about this. It's a movie I'd heard of. Like, when going to church, like, as a kid and everything, like, I went to a church at one time that had, like, a library where you could, like, legitimately rent stuff out of. And they had movies, and this was one of those movies, but I would always go for stuff like Veggie Tales or whatnot. I never tried to take out this, or sometimes I would rent out Prince of Egypt because they had that there too. And so from this all, for those of you who may be new to the channel, you can surmise that I am Christian. I grew up in a Christian household pretty much since like the end of like elementary school, beginning of middle school. We'd always been Christian, but we were never like super practicing. But for some reason, and I still not entirely sure why, we moved around that time, like the very end of elementary school for me, the very end of 5th grade. We moved, and my parents decided to start going to church. I like, again, we only ever went to church like for holidays. You know, Christmas, Easter, that kind of thing. We never went to church regularly, but for some reason they decided we were going to. And I grew up in that, and for a long time I grew up in, you know, very conservative churches. And was raised to believe a lot of falsehoods about the Bible and whatnot, and also was raised to believe a lot of bigoted lies about the real world through the lens of the church. And to the point where it got so bad eventually, especially after coming out, that I was ready to leave the church back in 2017 until I discovered my current one, which I've been with since 2017. Well, actually 2018. I started going in 2018. But yeah. It just, church and everything has been a very bumpy ride for me. And a lot of it I regret having taken part in and fallen for. Luckily, I'm part of a church that actually understands the message of love and everything, and it now actually, like, you know, is not bigoted. But yeah, it's like it got really bad for a bit there. And I'm saying all this because as a way to explain that, like, even through this, like, I do believe, I genuinely do believe that is my own and not something that was just instilled into me as a kid. I acknowledge the wrongs of the church and how most of the church in especially America, but all over the world, is absolutely fucked up and has done so much more harm than good. And So again, this is a movie I had heard of plenty of times during my years going to church and all, but had never seen. Um, I know this is a direct-to-video film, so I assume it's probably not going to look as good as Prince of Egypt. And I'll be completely honest, I'm not as familiar with the story of Joseph as I am with Moses. It's just one of those stories that we never got read like a lot in school, in church, and not school, in church and everything. Um, it's not one of those things that came up all the time. Like obviously, we'd learn about Jesus all the time. We'd learn about Paul and everything. We learn about Moses and Jacob and Esau, and even the likes of Esther and whatnot, Ruth. But Joseph is one that we rarely like discussed. Surprisingly, I feel, because it's like after growing up, I started hearing a lot more people in churches talk about Joseph. So it's really interesting, and I'm really interested to see this film and how it covers everything and exactly what it covers. And now, like Prince of Egypt, I assume this is not going to be entirely accurate to the Bible and everything. There's some creative liberties that would have been taken for the sake of entertainment and whatnot. But I'm hoping that nonetheless it's enjoyable. Like that's my big hope. Because even people who aren't Christian like The Prince of Egypt, it's one of those movies that has transcended the religion it's based around. People can watch it and just say, like, this is just a great movie. It's well animated, well acted, well written, well paced, has amazing music. And I'm hoping that this is the same, even if it's not like on the same level of quality as Prince of Egypt. I'm still hoping to like it as much, not just as a Christian, but as just a fan of animation, as someone who can appreciate good art. Honestly, I feel like Christian media that can transcend the religion and speak to anyone is much more not only effective, but also much more just appropriate than Christian materials, Christian media that only appeals to Christians. If you have Christian media that can appeal to everyone, even those who aren't Christians, then it ends up just doing more good. Like, even outside of just wanting to try and tell people Bible stories or messages about God and stuff, or even just messages that are in line with God's teachings. It's like, with something that appeals to everyone, it allows them to get that message, but also doesn't make them feel pushed out. When it's something that only appeals to someone who's already a Christian, it's like, what's going to get people into that? Like, you're not going to see regular secular people getting into Left Behind. It's a book series and movies. There's multiple iterations of movies that are directly for Christians. But you'll see secular people getting into stuff like the Chronicles of Narnia, which has a lot of Christian messaging in it, but can very well appeal to non-Christians because it doesn't hammer it over your head. You could say the same thing about Lord of the Rings even. Tolkien was very much a Christian and very much put that influence in his stories. I mean, Gandalf the Grey dying to save his friends and then coming back as Gandalf the White. Like, I think the allegory is pretty on the nose there. But the thing is, anyone can like that. Anyone can enjoy that because it doesn't only connect to that. It's a more universal idea still, and it's handled in a way to where anyone can enjoy it. So, yeah, I'm hoping that this is like that because Prince of Egypt was, and Prince of Egypt's fantastic to this day, still holds up. So I'm hoping that Joseph K. and Dreams, even if it's not quite on the same level, is has that kind of tone and style and quality to it. So, sorry if it seems like I've been yammering on a lot here. It's just quite a bit to say going into this because of my history with Christianity and going into my thoughts on this movie and Christian media in general. It's like, wanted to make sure that you all knew where I was coming from going into this film. So, we're just going to check this out. Hope for the best. It's like just over an hour. And we'll see how it goes. So, when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades black, then it fades back in. Everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the movie. So, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So, I said in the pre-thoughts that I was hoping this, like Prince of Egypt, would be a movie that would be... I didn't use the word then, but what I kind of meant to say was accessible. Accessible to pretty much anyone, whether they are Christian or not. Prince of Egypt is something that, like I said, transcended the religion. It's something that a lot of people who were not Christian were able to get into and love and appreciate as a film. And this movie, I would say, is not that. Joseph King of Dreams, I would say, is kind of reliant on you being a Christian to really get into it. And hell, there might be some non-Christians out there. There might be some secular people who like this movie. It's possible. I'm not going to say that it's a surefire thing, but from my perspective, this movie, unlike Prince of Egypt, did not have the tone, the gravitas, the pacing, the story, the art and animation, the music, the depth, everything that made Prince of Egypt so accessible to everyone. Prince of Egypt's production value is what elevated it. The voice acting, the art and animation, the shading and lighting, the intense power of the scenes. This did not have that. As a straight-to-video film, I was kind of worried about that, and it definitely felt much smaller, I guess you could say, in terms of its presentation. But I think another part of that is also because comparatively, the Moses story is much more universally known compared to the Joseph story. And again, this may just be from my perspective, and I admit I have a skewed perspective as someone who is a Christian. But this didn't feel to me like this is as far-reaching of a film, and that's probably why I never saw it until now, and why I don't hear people talk about this like they talk about Prince of Egypt. It just probably never got to that level of popularity because it never went in the same depth and directions as Prince of Egypt. But that's not to say it was bad, because it wasn't. It was harmlessly good. And I say that to mean that there was nothing offensive about it, nothing like bad or poorly handled with it. It was just very okay. It was kind of slow at points, and there were some things that were a little bland, but it wasn't anything like actively bad about it. It was just that it just didn't quite get to what it needed to do. It didn't quite reach a level of excitement or fun or entertainment. Even the parts that were meant to be very intense or frightening or even just emotionally resonant just never really quite got that emotion down pat. And it's a little disappointing. As I said in the pre-thoughts, this is a story that I was never as familiar with growing up as like the story of Moses. Because I hadn't really delved into this story until I was pretty much an adult. If it was mentioned in like when I was a kid going through church and everything, it was only very briefly. And they never really went into the story that much. Which again is kind of surprising. It's like I heard about it, but never, again, it never was really gone into at that time. And it's not a bad story. There's a lot of lessons that can be taken from it, and a lot of ideals that you can glean from every aspect of it. But the movie is just kind of okay. I guess a good way to put it would be it's very meh. It doesn't do anything bad, but it doesn't do anything like amazing either. It kind of treads that line, and it's like, oh, nothing in this is anything wrong. I don't dislike anything, like expressly. But nothing in this is impressing me. The voice acting, it had some great voice actors, but I don't feel like any of them really lived up to their potential. Mark Hamill, I could not tell that was him. And not necessarily in the best way. Like, it's cool when a voice actor can have a lot of range to where they can kind of disappear into a role. But the problem here is that it didn't feel like a Mark Hamill performance. Mark Hamill is amazing with his performances. And this just felt like he was getting a paycheck, honestly. It didn't feel like there was any passion or light behind the performance, and which is extremely like sad considering it's Mark Hamill and he has so much passion and light usually in his performances. And none of the others, like even like Ben Affleck or Jeff Bennett or any of the others who were in this, notable names even in acting and voice acting, none of them really felt like they were just hitting it at the right spot. They all felt like they were just kind of phoning it in a little. And not to the point where it was actively bad, but to the point where I just don't feel like anyone was really giving it their best. And I feel like a lot of this with the story, I don't know how accurate exactly it is to the how it is in the Bible, or how well it's, I guess you could say, paced compared to that. But it just felt in terms of the pacing of the film as it is. Really, really quick, and not in a good way. Not like, oh, it's flying by because I'm enjoying it so much. No, as in, it's like I feel like it could spend a little more time on some of these things. Um, it just felt like a little too quick, and maybe that's just me. And yeah, like I said, nothing really ruined it. Nothing really hurt the film, but it just came across as not entirely complete in a way. I never felt like it was like it really nailed it. And if that is just me, it's just me. But again, it's not bad by any means. I want to make that clear. I don't dislike this film. I just don't like it that greatly either. It's very in the middle for me. Um, but I can say I've seen it now. Again, it's something that I knew about since I was a child. Probably since this came out. What year did this come out? I would think probably in the 90s. Um, 2000. 2000. So I was 8 years old when this came out. Okay. Yeah, that I feel tracks. um, and when did Prince of Egypt come out? 98. So this came out 2 years after Prince of Egypt. Jeez. I forgot the actors that were in Prince of Egypt. Like, Jesus. Patrick Stewart, Martin Short, Michelle Pfeiffer, Steve Martin, Sandra Bullock, Ray Fiennes, Val Kilmer. I forgot that those were the voices in Prince of Egypt. Jesus. Now Mark Hamill being in this doesn't actually seem like that unbelievable. Um, Also, I noticed that Prince of Egypt was about an hour and a half, while Joseph King Dreams was about an hour 15. So maybe that extra time helped. It's like 15 minutes, but anything can help with that too. Well, maybe if this movie also was like more around the same time and had that extra 15 minutes, it could have allowed for it to feel a little more full and everything. Um, but yeah, like again, 8 years old since this came out, I'm 30 now. 22 years ago. And 22 years ago, it's obvious anyway, because 2000 to 2022. But it's like 22 years ago, this came out. And I knew about it pretty much since it did. And I just never checked it out. And now I finally have. And so I'm happy about that. I'm happy I gave it a chance. And yeah, it's like, I knew where it was going because I did know the story. Like you heard me during the reaction, like when I had a very noticeable reaction to when the brothers were singing at the beginning about loving their younger brother. And then I kind of made a joke at one point, like saying like, oh, they're not just, I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of like, oh, the end part was like, it won't kill you, like to like go hang out with your brothers or something. For that's what it was. I was like talking because it was when he was going to hang out with his brothers for the day instead of staying home to study and everything. And he's like, oh, let him hang out with his brothers for a day. It won't kill him or anything. Like I was making a joke there. Which I mean, it didn't kill him, but they thought it did. So again, I know the story. I do. Um, yeah, it just felt like it was a little too underdeveloped, I guess you could say. If a little, I feel if a little more was put into it, a little more runtime, and a little more pacing things out a little better, I feel like it could have been a lot better of a film. But again, not bad as it was, just not great either, just kind of mid. But either way, tell me in the comments below, what did you think of Joseph, King of Dreams? And thank you all so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.